Welcome, guys. As we are diving into the second part of this mini series that we're doing on Set Free, we'll be looking at Mark chapter 5, verses 27 to 34, where it says, She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, If I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, Who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, Who touched me? And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. So there's a dialogue between the reporter and the woman who was healed. So it all starts off with the reporter saying, Woman, with the issue of blood, your healing transpired under quite different circumstances. Tell us about your encounter with Jesus. For one, I go by daughter now, like daughter of Abraham. I was afflicted by a long time, 12 years. I had been to numerous doctors and no one could help me. I was desperate. Desperate enough to risk the crowd? Yes, I had to. It was the only way I could get to Jesus. I knew there was a good possibility of being recognized and severely punished. Being ceremonially unclean is not a casual offense, you know. I'd been banned from all human contact, and I had to try. Then the reporter says, And there you are being pushed around in a throng of people. Tell us about the moment. The touch that has captivated the hearts and imaginations of believers everywhere. You were healed right then? Yes, immediately. It felt as if his entire being, even his cloak, was saturated with God's miraculous power. The bleeding stopped. I could feel in my body that I was free from my suffering. Then the reporter says, I imagine you were hoping to slip back through the crowd undetected, but that's not what happened, is it? Not at all. Jesus turned around to the crowd and asked, Who touched my clothes? At first, I froze. I didn't know if he was angry or not, but he kept looking. I recognized, of course, he'll know it's me. He's Jesus. His cloak alone just healed me. So I came forward and fell at his feet. Then the reporter asks, I'll ask you the same question I asked daughter of Abraham. Were you fearful? The circumstances were certainly frightening. I was trembling when I told him the truth, but after a few moments, I wasn't fearful of him. His eyes were full of compassion. He could have kept me out, or he could have kept going on his way, but he stopped to acknowledge me, not rebuke me. He listened and was sympathetic to my suffering. He said, Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in faith and be freed from your suffering. Then the reporter asks, How was your life changed since that day? Well, obviously, I'm physically healed, but my healing didn't eliminate my need for Jesus. It connected me to it. He set me free to pursue my life in him. The very thing Satan tried to destroy me with. Jesus used to restore our relationship and make me whole in every way. I am chosen and set free. So the prayer for today is that prayer you prayed from the previous entry, keep going with it. Keep bringing your voices to God and ask him to set you free from them. It's okay to be desperate. And so from the yesterday's prayer, it says, take your vice to Jesus. Take your vices to God. Anything that's got a hold of your heart more than it should, and ask God to help free you from it. And so here are 3 reflection questions we could be reflecting on. The first one is, what are you willing to risk to get to Jesus? What are you willing to risk to get to Jesus? Describe a time when you felt desperate to be in His presence. What did you do? Describe a time when you felt desperate to be in His presence. What did you do? How was Jesus restored the parts of your life that Satan has tried to use to destroy you? How was Satan restored the parts of your life that Satan has tried to use to destroy you? And that will conclude our time for day 36 with the part 2 of being set free. The part that really stood out to me is Jesus, His ability to notice even the smallest, the tiniest thing, the greatest detail, right? How He noticed that there was somebody that touched His garment, even though there must be like 30, 40 bodies pressed up, maybe not that much, but like that's being pressed up against His body. Like, how would He know that there's just like the single person that touches garment? And that's just really fascinating for me to read. It's just like Jesus' desire to know every single detail, even though He probably knows it already. He still wants us to explain why we did what we did. And so for Him to notice the woman out of a lot of people is insane. And another thing that stood out to me that is really impactful in a sense to me is when Jesus called the woman daughter of Abraham. It's just really significant because the poor woman, nobody has ever called her a daughter for a long time, probably for 12 years, because nobody wants to be related to this woman who's bleeding for 12 years. And so for Jesus to come into the story, into her life, and call her daughter, it's like the most heartwarming feeling word that you could ever possibly feel. Jesus there giving you a name, not the name that you were called, not the name that people give you, but the name that Jesus gave you. And that's all that matters. Like, I don't care what other people says about my name, as long as that's how Jesus addresses me. That's all I'm gonna take and make sure that it actually matters in my life. And it's just like the sense of how like Jesus, His insufferable love for those who are being neglected in society, who is being treated horribly, how He's able to reach down to those people and say, you are my daughter, and that you are well loved by me. It just shows how whenever those moments happen, it just makes everything feel like it doesn't matter anymore. Because Jesus is the light in our world. And so for Him to call us by name, even though there's like thousands of, there's 8 billion people out in the world, and for Him to pay attention to my life says a lot about His devotion to our lives. And I wish that we are more devoted to his life, like devoted to him in ways where like we try to be more like him, reaching out to those people who are in need, reaching out to those people who are being neglected, reaching out to those people who are being mistreated, standing up for injustice, standing up for those people who makes judgmental judgments without really wanting to understand what somebody's going through. That part it just makes me really frustrated because like, why would you start judging people even though you have zero experience in what their life is like? So instead of going about judging them, why don't we just stop, shut up, and listen to their story? Because without their story, it makes us look like idiots and foolish, and it harms the relationship that you have with that person, and that person's relationship is being harmed by you. Like the victim's relationship with Jesus is being harmed by you because you call yourself a Christian. You call yourself to be a representative of Jesus, and for you to act in ways that is totally not Jesus' way takes away the ability for the victim to have any kind of relationship with Christ. And so may we be slow to judgment, be slow to anger, and be quick to listen, quick to sympathize with those people, quick to reaching out to those people who are being neglected, right? Quick to pointing out the issues of yourself. If you have your own issues, may you be quick to acknowledge your own personal issues before bringing it up onto other people. Like taking your issues upon somebody else because you don't know what to do with your own. And so may we be more like Jesus, because that's what Christians, that's what we devoted our life to, is to be more like him. And I think that one of the most important thing is, do we even know who Jesus is, right? Not the Jesus that we pictured him to be, but be the Jesus that Jesus showed himself to be. We don't need a mascot Jesus. We need a Jesus that can speak for himself. And so can we put aside our own feelings and look at Jesus for who he is, not who we're trying to make him to be, not trying to fit him into our beliefs. And may we have the open heart, being open-minded to the possible mistrust that we may have, or misbelief that we have about Jesus, and be open to new ideas of who Jesus is. And so may we go and walk with God today.